and Syria. Watch this space. Israel bombs target Syria, injuring 3 Syrian soldiers. The Israeli Air Force has carried out more than 1,000 airstrikes on Syrian targets over the past 5 years in preparation for a larger potential future war. And this from the Cradle. Zionist forces bombed targets in the Hama and Tartus regions of Syria on 12 March, wounding 3 Syrian Arab Army soldiers. Syrian air defense also shot down a number of missiles, Syrian state media, Sana has reported. A military source said in a statement to Sana that around 7 o'clock and 15 minutes this morning, the Israeli enemy carried out an air aggression with bursts of missiles from the direction of northern Lebanon, targeting some points in the countryside of Tartus and Hama, and our air defense means confronted the aggression missiles and shot down some of them. The source added that the Israeli attack led to the injury of 3 military personnel and some material losses. The strike continues the string of recent Israeli attacks on Syria. The Zionist Air Force launched an attack targeting Aleppo International Airport in the early hours of 7 March, damaging its runway and forcing aid deliveries for quake-struck Syria to be redirected to Latakia and Damascus airports. The Israeli attack came 1 month after 7.7 magnitude earthquake decimated Syria's northwest Aleppo. Syria's northwest. Aleppo International Airport was being used as the central hub for receiving humanitarian aid planes. On 18 February, at least 5 people died and 15 were critically injured in Damascus after Israeli warplanes dropped bombs on residential neighborhoods. On 6 September, Israeli warplanes launched a missile attack on the Aleppo International Airport. The attack came days after a previous Israeli strike on airports in both Aleppo and Damascus on 1 September. And according to 1 March 2022 report from the Jerusalem Post, the Israeli Air Force has carried out more than 1,000 airstrikes on Syria targets over the past 5 years. Syria has several different missile defense systems to counter Israeli airstrikes. The most advanced of these systems is the Russian S-300 and the Iranian Bavar 373 systems, which have not been deployed to protect against the Zionist strikes. Damascus-based journalist Vanessa Beeley has said that Israel intermittently bombs Syrian targets to degrade its missile defense infrastructure and to probe for the locations of its missile systems in order to destroy them in preparation for a larger coming attack on the country. According to an article in the Jerusalem Post cited by Beeley, Israel is carrying out war between war operations by bombing Syria, implying that Israel sees the current period as a hiatus between wars and that these attacks are in preparation for another imminent war. Syria is therefore not using its most advanced systems because it doesn't want to reveal where they are or allow them to be destroyed in preparation for this larger potential future war. From Memo, Palestinian group says 3 members killed by Israeli fire in the West Bank. A Palestinian group said Sunday that 3 of its members were killed in clashes with Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank, Anadolu. Anadolu reports that, according to the memo. The Lion's Den armed group said the fatalities occurred when its fighters ambushed Israeli forces in the city of Nablus, resulting in clashes that killed 3 of its members. The Israeli military confirmed that the clashes and said a 4th armed Palestinian had been arrested and taken into custody. No injuries were reported among Israeli soldiers. The Israeli army accuses the Lion's Den group, which emerged last year in the occupied West Bank, of carrying out deadly attacks on Israeli targets. Tensions in the occupied West Bank have escalated in recent months, with repeated Israeli attacks on Palestinian towns. According to Palestinian figures, more than 80 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli fire since the beginning of the year. 14 Israelis were also killed in separate attacks during the same period. And from World Nation, 3 Palestinians killed by Israeli soldiers in the West Bank. Nablus militia promises members of a group of those who had stationed themselves around the military city. There's a picture there of them. And while the U.S. and Egypt call on Israel and the Palestinian National Authority to take unilateral steps that could lead to fears of full-scale conflict, the spiral of violence in the country continues, and nothing indicates that that day is expected. Members of Syria Golani, a special squad dedicated to the fight against terrorism in the brigade of the Zionist army, killed 3 Palestinian soldiers this morning after they were killed in a military confrontation of the JIT intersection in the northern West Bank. The 4th attacker, according to Israeli spokesman, turned to the security forces. The soldiers recovered 3 rifles, a pistol, and bowls from the attackers, the army said after searching the car with which the armed Palestinians came. Since this is not the first time that this type of armed force has taken place in the areas, the soldiers of Syria Golani were waiting for them hours before. The Ministry of Health identified those who were wounded by the Israelis, by the Zionists, as Jihad al-Shami, Uday al-Shami, and Mohammed Dabik. The Lake of the Lions, an armed group, the Lion's Den, an armed group based in the old town of Nablus, identified its command, claiming it had ambushed soldiers with whom it clashed. And the English on that is a little broken. I guess the translation is not very accurate. From the Palestine Chronicle, strike declared in Nablus following Israeli killing of 3 Palestinians. Palestinians in the West Bank city of Nablus held a strike on Sunday after the killing of 3 Palestinians by Zionist forces earlier in the same day, the New Arab reported. Shops remained closed on Sunday after Israeli forces had fired on a vehicle with Palestinian men inside near the Sura military checkpoint west of Nablus. The Palestinian Ministry of Health said that 3 Palestinians, including an 18-year-old, were killed in the attack. It said the bodies were detained by Israeli forces. One Palestinian man, identified as Ibrahim al-Awar Tani, was arrested during the attack, a source told the New Arab's Arabic language service Al-Arabi al-Jadid. The Palestinian Health Ministry said Sunday's killings bring up the total number of Palestinians killed by Israeli forces since January to 84. Memo: Nablus martyrs' families refused to receive PA officials. The families of the Nablus martyrs refused to receive security officials from the Palestinian Authority on Sunday and told them not to attend the funerals. The brother of the martyr, Jihad al-Shami, who was killed by occupation authorities yesterday, turned away Abu Arab al-Bastami, an officer from the PA security services, and asked him, "You tortured my brother. How can you come to offer your condolences?" The martyr, Mohammed al-Dabik, was martyred on Sunday morning along with al-Shami, was released on Friday from the PA's preventative security prisons. 3 resistance fighters were killed yesterday near the Syria checkpoint west of Nablus in the occupied West Bank. The Ministry of Health said the martyrs are Mohammed Wasfi al-Shami, 24, Uday Othman Rafiq al-Shami, 22, and Mohammed Raid Naji al-Dabik, 18. Israel has killed 84 Palestinians so far this year. And from Arabia, 3 Palestinian gunmen shot dead by Israeli soldiers in West Bank. 3 Palestinian gunmen were shot dead after they fired at Zionist soldiers in the northern occupied West Bank near Nablus. The Zionist army said on Sunday as violence in the region continued. The military said that the armed gunmen opened fire on soldiers at an army position near the JIT junction west of Nablus, with the soldiers responding with live fire. 3 armed gunmen were neutralized during the exchange of fire, and an additional armed gunman surrendered himself to the forces and was apprehended, the army said in a statement. Violence intensified last year but has worsened in the West Bank since Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu returned to the office in December in governing coalition with ultra-Orthodox Jewish and extreme right allies. Since the start of the year, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has claimed the lives of 81 Palestinian adults and children, including militants and civilians. 12 Israeli civilians, including 3 children and 1 policeman, as well as 1 Ukrainian civilian, have been killed over the same period, according to an AFP tally based on official sources from both sides. And from newhagebd.net, Syrian pro-Iran soldiers killed in Israeli strikes. Syrian state news agency Sana, citing a military source, reported that around 7:15 a.m. the Israeli enemy carried out an air attack firing missiles from the direction of North Lebanon with targets in the Tartus and Hama countryside. Sana did not specify the target, but had said that the attack wounded 3 soldiers and caused some material losses. It added that Syrian air defenses intercepted some of the missiles. The Zionist military said it doesn't comment on reports in the foreign media. Since Syria's civil war erupted in 2011, Israel's carried out hundreds of strikes there, targeting government troops as well as Iran-backed forces and Lebanon's Hezbollah fighters. Earlier, suspected Islamic State group militants on Saturday killed 3 truffle hunters and kidnapped at least 26 others in northern Syria, a war monitor said in the latest attack during this year's harvest. The attack on the civilians happened near positions held by pro-Iran forces, said the Britain-based observatory, which relies on a wide network of sources in Syria. Syrian state media didn't immediately report the incident. Between February and April each year, hundreds of impoverished Syrians search for truffles in the vast Syrian desert, or Badia, a known hideout for jihadists that's also littered with landmines. Since February, 139 people, 120 of them civilians, have been killed by IS attacks targeting truffle hunters or mines left by the extremists, according to the observatory. Syria's desert truffles fetch high prices in a country battered by 12 years of war and a crushing economic crisis. And from Press TV, Israeli aggression targets western Syria, several army personnel injured. In yet another act of aggression against the Syrian territory, the Israeli regime has carried out a missile attack on Syria's northwestern province of Hama. Syria's official news agency, Sana, said the air raid targeted Hama's countryside and the coastal city of Tartus on Sunday, with Syrian military intercepting some of the Israeli missiles. At about 7:15 a.m. on Sunday, the Israeli enemy carried out an aerial attack of aggression with bursts of missiles from the direction of northern Lebanon, targeting some sites in the countryside of Tartus and Hama provinces, and our air defenses intercepted the missiles and downed some of them. Sana quoted an unnamed military source as saying, "The aggression caused the injury of 3 army personnel in addition to some material damages," the news agency added. Local media sources showed a huge billow of smoke rising from the site of the Zionist missile attack on the town of Mashiaf in Hama. Earlier on Tuesday, Israeli aircraft carried out a new strike against the international airport in Aleppo from the direction of the Mediterranean Sea west of the coastal city of Latakia. Syrian media, quoting a military source, reported that the attack caused only material damage to the runway of Aleppo International Airport and took the airport out of service. Syrian media had earlier said that the country's air defenses intercepted Israeli missiles coming from the direction of the Mediterranean, shooting down a number of them. Israel frequently violates Syrian sovereignty by carrying out missile attacks on targets inside the country, mostly using the airspace of Lebanon and the occupied territories. The targets included residential buildings, military positions, especially those of the Hezbollah resistance movement, which has played a key role in helping the Syrian army in its fight against foreign-backed terrorists. And the Lebanon movement, Hezbollah, is also frequently hit by Israeli strikes. The Tel Aviv regime has been a main supporter of terrorist groups that have battled the government of President Bashar al-Assad since the foreign-backed militancy erupted in Syria in early 2011. Syria has repeatedly complained to the UN over Israeli assaults, urging the Security Councils to take action against Tel Aviv's crime. The calls, however, have fallen on deaf ears. And we'll be back with more news.